So we'll kick off the first panel. My name is Mark Bruner. I'm the Senator's National Security Advisor. Again, I want to thank you very much for attending, and especially the agency reps and our panelists who've volunteered their time. For today's DoD panel, I'm privileged to introduce Secretary Dean Popps. Dean is the former Acting Assistant Secretary of the Army for Acquisition, Logistics, and Technology, and the Army Acquisition Executive, serving for 6 years for both the Bush and Obama administration. But what's really unique about Dean's service, beyond the Pentagon jobs, is that he's been expeditionary. He started his work in this latest round of government service on the ground in Iraq as the Director of Industrial Conversion. He supervised the restructuring of the Iraqi military industry into the Iraqi Ministry of Science and Technology. Once he returned to the Pentagon, he then oversaw the 42,000-person Army acquisition workforce. In addition, he was tapped to serve as an expert on the Commission on Wartime Contracting and to assess how we can improve wartime contracting, especially when we're engaged in 2 wars. Dean has been recognized numerous times, but additionally has received the Joint Civilian Commendation Award, the U.S. Army's Distinguished Service Medal, and the Engineer Regiment's Bronze to Fleury Medal for his work specifically on the Iraqi introduction. So again, please join me in welcoming Secretary Dean Popps.
Thank you, and good morning, everybody. Commander Bruner, former Commander Bruner, thank you very much for all the work that you and your staff have put into this to make it a very successful event. I've been very impressed with how you've handled the facilities and all of us out here. I'd like to thank, on behalf of all of us, Senator Warner and Congressman Davis for their excellent remarks in opening this, along with an old friend of mine, President Alan Merton. And I think they've set a very good context and a very good stage, which we can now parlay on in rapid-fire fashion. 45 minutes for a panel as distinguished as these 2 folks to my right is not a lot of time. And I wanted to kind of set an optic signal by saying I wanted to roll up my sleeves and have a very interactive conversation with you. This is not about my talking at you for 15 minutes and the other 2 panelists talking at you for 15 minutes, then trying to squeeze in a couple of questions. To that end, I would ask that those who are handling the microphones please position themselves in a way that if there is a quick question or we do want to be interrupted as we take on a particular topic, that we're able to raise your hand and get you a mic right away. And I really would like to make this as very interactive as I possibly can. Thanks to all the small businesses, the agencies, governmental agencies, both state and federal, that showed up here today. They, along with you, contribute to making this really the best equipped and best serviced military there is. Despite all of our challenges and despite all of the complexities that we face, as I've traveled the world, I can't find anybody who really has a better system of utilization of both big and large companies, has a fairer system by and large than ours, and comes out with a better result. Our soldiers, sailor, airmen, Marines, as you know, in this long war really and truly have lacked for nothing. And we should be very, very proud of that, that both as government and industry, we've conspired to make that happen. I have about 2 or 3 very quick remarks that I'd like to toss out as teasers, but first I would like to introduce to my right, Mr. Stuart Hazlitt. He is the Deputy Director of the Defense Procurement and Acquisition Policy, DPAP world within the Defense Acquisition Executive's Office. And he is, among other senior leaders at the Office of Secretary of Defense, one of the key policy people who has to deal with the procurement policy and the acquisition strategies at writ large for the Department of Defense. And I think that's an excellent addition. In the form of me, you see, I was the guy within a particular service that headed the acquisition process for that particular service. But remember, we have 3 services, and they all have to answer and be synced up to OSD as well, and so that's what we have here today in the presence of Mr. Hazlitt. And his boss, Shay Assad, been a very important member of prior and this administration with regard to acquisition policy. Sitting to his right is Director Linda Oliver, the Acting Director of Small Business Programs at OSD, and she and her team are directly responsible for answering to the Undersecretary, to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and to the Secretary of Defense about the small business programs for the Department of Defense. And it is a daunting job because of the size of the money that's spent and because of the amount of people that we're dealing with. And she's actually done this job twice, and both of these people are very senior careerists in the senior executive service, and which makes them in effect the equivalent of general officers if they were wearing uniforms. And I ask you to welcome them as well. Some quick thoughts without some answers. Number one, I think that the DOD has a pretty good record compared to many other government agencies with regard to small business, if not the best. It also is my general understanding, particularly from my Army numbers, we compete about 70% plus of our business, and that's a pretty good record, I think, overall. An observation from being on the ground in Baghdad in '03 up until retiring in April of this year. October 7th of this year will begin the 10th year of this war in Iraq and Afghanistan. October 7th, 2001 was the first shot fired in Afghanistan. And I will tell you that the procurement and acquisition and contracting and management and auditing and resources communities really have been turned on their heels and turned upside down by the volume and complexity of the work that has been required to support upwards of 200,000 soldiers in theater, along with 200,000 contractors. So it's been a tremendous and lengthy and enduring effort that the department has been going through, and as a matter of fact, it's been kind of discovery learning in some areas as we go along. Give you an example with my Army workforce. It sounds like a big number, 42,000 Army acquisition professionals, but remember that they're spread over 14 Joint and Army program offices, which manage many hundreds of programs of record. In addition, the Army Acquisition Executive is the ultimate oversight for Army contracting and gives head of contracting activity authority to all parts of Army in order for them to conduct activities. At one point, not too long ago, maybe a decade or so ago, we had 160,000 people doing this. Today we have 40,000 people doing it, anywhere from 50% or more eligible to retire in the next 3 to 5 years. The workload is 7 to 8 times, maybe even 9 times what it was prior to 9/11, with fewer people than there were at 9/11. So this gives you a perspective and lens from us about what we're doing. We've become expeditionary in many things, and we have had to go around the traditional procurement systems for other things. MRAP vehicles, IED defeat systems, and also body armor, and so many other things were rapid equipped, often equipped, procured overnight, procured without research, development, never without resources, but often without a lot of execution that would be required in a program of record. For some of you who often have come to see so many of us, let me give you some pockets to think about. Remember that nothing starts in the Department of Defense anywhere without a requirement. You have to have a requirement. I don't care if you have the cure for cancer. I don't care if you can fly to Mars in 3.5 hours. If there's not a requirement for that, if someone doesn't say, I need that, at the very other side of I've got it, it's very, very difficult for that acquisition process to occur. right, what you have to my right is two outstanding policy and oversight folks. So think of all the things that they have to deal with, in addition to the contracting and the contracting vehicles and how are they being done and is that being done fairly? Are they IDIQ? Are they fixed price? All of those types of strategies, come under the oversight that many of us had. You also have to remember that acquisition also involves the world of research and development, technical development. It involves the world of sustainment and sustainment contracts, logistics. It involves the rapid acquisition piece that I talked to you about, and it involves the execution and progress and process of many programs of record. Army alone has over 680 programs of record. So that's yet a whole other different world that you have to deal with. I would say to you, I'm going to finish up here quickly. I want to tell you that you have to remember since 1974 we've been a volunteer army. In World War II, there were 10 million men at arms to do everything from peeling potatoes to giving a haircut to delivering mail and so forth. Today, we rely with a much, much smaller army, and by the way, if the President, the administration, and the Department of Defense decide to save money, one of the places they will have to go will be to the force structure. We may have a smaller army if there's less money, and so therefore, we will continue to rely on contractors. Why? Because we don't have 10 million men under arms the way we did in World War II to be able to do everything from sweeping streets to doing all other types of chores. And so today, what I consistently saw in my nearly 7 years in the department was that we have three people on the battlefield. We have the joint soldier, who's so well equipped and so joint, particularly in his comms and his equipment and in his strategy. And we have, next to that soldier, we have airman, Marine, we have a contractor. And that contractor could be providing translation services, security services, IT services, food services, you name it. And on the other side of the joint warfighter, we have DoD civilians who also have to deploy, who are contracting officers representatives, Defense Acquisition University teachers, Defense Contract Management Agency, Defense Contract Audit Agency, and all of the 10 or 15 or 20 IG folks who have to be out there in the battle space as well. One other thought, over these 7 years, we have been slammed. Every acquisition process gets slammed with hundreds of protests, dozens of protests. That's become a way of life now. You lose a contract, you protest, it slows the system down. Just an observation. Congressman Davis was right in cueing you about the Big Bang Theory versus chunking, okay? I think that this Department of Defense is through with big, humongous programs that take 20 years to develop that then get outpaced by technology by the time they're ready to be fielded. So I think that was a very, very important point. Also, the point about taxpayer value, but remember, we are still caught up in the federal acquisition regulations. And that means that our job isn't necessarily be the most efficient or most valuable, value added. It really and truly is to be most fair and to add complete fidelity to the DFAR and to the FAR. So those are my thoughts as a way of provoking the audience and the two panelists. And Stuart, bring your own talking points or add to them or contradict it. Happy to have you.
Thank you, Secretary Pops. The message that my boss asked me to bring back is that you're missed very much in the puzzle palace. Civil servant, 26 years. To speak in front of such a distinguished group as yourselves, I feel like a gunslinger without a gun because I don't have PowerPoint slides. So you're going to have to bear with me, or we could talk about the Pentagon. But I am the Deputy Director for Defense Procurement. My focus is on program acquisition and strategic sourcing. For all intent and purposes, I am the Senior Contracting Officer Advisor to Dr. Carter and to Mr. Assad. So in that role, I get to sit in many of the meetings where we talk about the future of current programs and as we look at new programs. But today, I'll just, my thoughts or highlights would be strengthening the acquisition workforce. We had a lot of talk. I know that you're all very interested in this insourcing term. What does it mean to us? Well, over the last 26 years, I can talk from being a contracting officer in the Defense Department, is that I've seen the numbers. The numbers stayed stagnant for me as an 1102 or procurement analyst, because I always was the youngest guy in the room. I never thought I would still be 26 years later the youngest guy in the room. And as I look around, I say, wow, something's not right. And I think as we look at the numbers, and I think our most accurate count of the acquisition workforce is approximately 127,000 today. And you heard Secretary Pop say what it was in the Army and what it is today at 40-some thousand of professional acquisition professionals in the Army, 127,000. And what do those 127,000 people do? Last year in 2009, we obligated approximately $379 billion in 3.8 million actions. That's a lot of zeros. That's over $1 billion of obligations a day done by those acquisition professionals. And so we knew we needed help. We need to strengthen that workforce. We've got to have the capabilities. And with that, we start looking and saying, well, how are we doing it then? We have a strong partnership with industry. And as we look at that, which we would say we have an unbalanced workforce. We've had to augment our workforce with contractor support to the point where we start being in danger of crossing that, is it a government inherent function? We definitely do not want, as stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, to have a contractor holding and making the decision on the purse strings. That's not right, and it's not fair to the taxpayers. So as we look at that, we look at bringing on 34,000 new civil servants by 2015, and with that, we're looking to target 10,000 people to insource over that time frame. And to date, I believe we've insourced approximately 1,500 people. I don't think that's a strong impact across the continental United States to one locality, but as you know, there's a lot of pink badges that run around the Pentagon that are supplied by local small businesses and large businesses, and we're looking at that. And we're doing it through a very analytical perspective of how do we decide which systems engineers and program managers do we bring on. But I'll tell you, in those numbers of $379 billion obligated, in 2009, we obligated $18 billion to acquire engineers, services. We obligated $17 billion to acquire program managers. Close to being where are you with those government inherent functions, and with that comes a very important issue of personal versus non-personal services. Another point that I highlight to you to possibly stimulate conversation is acquisition initiatives, or as most recent, as we focus it toward what we consider efficiency initiatives, doing more without more. We've been looking at the DoD 5000 series, which is my guidebook for all major program acquisitions. We have revised it totally. We've had some help from the Weapon Systems Acquisition Reform Act, and it's helping us strengthen the upfront process of how we acquire not only major weapon systems, but how we acquire services. And with that comes contract type. What is the correct pricing arrangement to use? What are we making sure that we have real competition? When I say real competition, I think there is such a thing as fake competition. We've looked at the proliferation of large IDIQ contracts over the last decade that have gone to maybe a few suppliers that have been locked in for 5 or more years. We think that's wrong. And we are trying to do something about that, and I promise you that Dr. Carter and Shay Assad and Frank Kendall all are focused on reining that in. We now talk no more than 3 years, 3 to 5 years, depending on the situation. We look at maximizing competition. No longer, when they come in and justify to us on their acquisition strategies that they only think 4 or 5 companies can do this, we say, why? I mean, isn't there more companies out there that can do this? And as we look and open that up, they would tell us, but we're resource constrained. We can't handle that many suppliers. Well, we know we can't. We've done it on Seaport E, we've done it on others, and we're going to continue to maximize competition. And when we have maybe 2 or more of those small businesses that are in that industry, we are now, let's set it aside to all small businesses. Let's maximize it. I would tell you under knowledge-based services, that's a big focus. I look at knowledge-based services, at those types of services, and I told the undersecretary, I said a subset of that is what I consider advisory and assistance services. We obligated $53 billion in 2009 for knowledge-based services. We need to understand how we are acquiring those types of services, and that's a big focus for us. And I would last highlight to you, which I think is so important when I talk to small businesses or even large businesses or medium-sized businesses, is how do you enter the marketplace that you have goods or services that you want to provide to the Defense Department? There are now some powerful tools out there that I think are being underused, and that is the Federal Procurement Data System. There used to be a time frame that people would say, well, the Federal Procurement Data System, that data is not very accurate, it's inaccurate. I use that. I live by it. I know my leadership lives by it. I even use it when I have to give information to people like Senator Warner and others, because it's becoming more accurate. We're starting now with a confidence level that I'd say I have in the upper 80% confidence level in the data that's in that system. And the power of that system is that you can go in and you can look at your, whatever that federal supply class is or product service class that you are providing to us. You can target that and you can see exactly where are we buying it. Is it at Wright Pat? Is it at Fort Bragg? Is it at the Naval Station? You can find the location. You can find out how much they've been acquiring. And I assure you, at our military installations, those commanders, when they build their budget every year, if they've been buying something every year for the last 10 years, and let's say they've been spending $10 million on it every year, I'm here to tell you, I anticipate they will continue to spend that much on it every year for the next few years, because it is something that they need. And you can target that. And you can even, through the Federal Procurement Data System, you could drill it down and you can see the name of the contracting officer that's been buying those goods and services. So if you want to knock on doors and you want to put together your market plan, it's a powerful tool. USAspending.gov is becoming a very useful tool too. So there are some tools out there, so I welcome any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Director Hazlett, thank you. Director Oliver, good morning.
Good morning.
The floor is yours.
All right. We have a little handicap here because from here, we really can't see the audience very well, and I don't do microphones very well. I don't know how somebody's going to signal to me when I've wandered too far away from the microphone so nobody can hear me, but do it somehow. I want to talk to you about 3 things this morning, I think, and I want to be really quick because, in truth, I'm a lot more interested in what you have to tell me than what I have to tell you. I know this stuff. I want to talk to you, I want to mention a response to something Senator Warner said, and a response to something Representative Davis said, and then I just want to tell you about something that's coming up. Senator Warner mentioned insourcing, and I am here to tell you I have been yelled at about, as a Department of Defense representative, been yelled at about insourcing all across the United States. So I'm ready to hear your yelling. But before you yell at me, I want to tell you what the real problem is. And I know because we have 3 different small businesses supporting my office. The problem is, and this comes up in the support contract area, that was services as opposed to goods. These 3 small businesses are just astounding. They are the level of service, and we've had service from other than small businesses as well, and I can tell you by comparison, the level of service of these small businesses is amazing. I can watch my own mental process and figure out what is happening across the rest of the Department of Defense. And by the way, when you say to me, small businesses are being a lot more impacted by insourcing than big businesses, I have to say to you, kind of feels that way to me too, but I don't know how to prove it. But here's the reason it's happening. When, as in the case of my office, when we need anything, the small business managers are about a half a step ahead of us. If there is a hint of a problem with any of the people who are providing service to us, the small business managers, or the managers of the small businesses, instantly solve it. They provide counseling to their employees, or correction to their employees, or they fire their employees and get another one. But the level of service is just amazing. As a result of being surrounded by all these capable people, there is a tendency on the part of the people in my office, and I think across the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and probably across the Department of Defense as a whole, there is a tendency when we have a problem to say, who could I get to do this? Oh yeah, she's very good, or he's very good. And so we probably have slipped some of the things that we have contractors do. We probably are having contractors do some inherently governmental things, and or certainly close to inherently governmental. And when we think about insourcing governmental, as we've been asked to think through, what should we be insourcing because it's inherently governmental? When we think about that, we are supposed to be thinking about what is the job, the responsibility that we're insourcing. But what we really think about, understanding what we are supposed to be thinking about, what creeps into the back of our minds is, oh yes, that really competent person. We insource responsibilities, but it's really hard for us to separate out the insourcing of responsibilities from the capabilities of these great people. So, this whole problem is your fault, not mine. If you weren't so sensitive to your customers, if you didn't give us such good people, we wouldn't even think about insourcing. We'd do it only to the bigs and not to the smalls. Okay, so that's on insourcing. Representative Davis talked about networking. And he said, get into the government, go see those people. And he's right, networking is critical for small business. It's critical for everybody, but especially for small businesses. Most of you know this, but I want to just remind you of the most efficient way for you to network. In the Department of Defense, every place you have the authority to procure, every place you have contracting officers, you have at least a part-time small business specialist, or if there are several, small business managers. Now, the statute says for the people who are contracting officers some of the time and small business specialists other times, the statute says the small business responsibilities come first, the contracting responsibilities come second. Those are the people who you should use as your entryway to the command, because they want to hear from you. But I want to remind you of one thing about networking via the small business specialists. Small business specialists know an amazing amount about what their command buys. They don't necessarily, are not responsible for knowing what they buy down the road. That's the responsibility of the small business specialist down the road. So by the time when you come to a command, you ought to go see the small business specialist. They'll at least be happy to see you. But it'll be a lot more efficient if you have already figured out that this is the part of the Department of Defense that buys what you sell. So I agree with networking. A second little piece of critical networking is procurement technical assistance centers. George Mason has a procurement technical assistance center. Those are very capable people. They can give you all sorts of insights, helping you figure out what part of the Department of Defense buys what you sell and how to approach them. Okay, the third thing I wanted to just mention to you, for you to be watching out for, is there is a presidential task force, an existing presidential task force. There are two, but there is one very short-term, like 6-month task force in which the president has asked for a report on ideas that will make government contracting better for small businesses. Just the kind of thing I'm happy to have the president interested in, although it's turned out to be quite a lot of work. The task force consists of 3 parts. There are the principals, the big important cabinet level people for the Department of Defense. It's Dr. Carter. There is an executive committee that has one person from each of the, for example, one person from the Department of Defense, and I'm that person. And then there are working groups, of which there are 5, and they are composed across agencies. Shea Assad and I chair one of the working groups. Today is the day, there are 5 working groups. Today is the day that no more than 3 per working group, therefore no more than 15 proposals will go together. On the 22nd of this month, the executive group will do a bunch of work on it to get it to be prepared for the principals, who will then look at it. There'll be a little more time to fix things, and then the report will go to the president. I think it's the 26th of August. It's to go to the president. I actually think some things might come out of this task force. We'll see what survives and what doesn't survive, but the directions to us have been, do really practical things. Give us time, say what has to be done to carry out these ideas, and give us timelines and plans for how it would be done. There, as I said, will be some number less than 15. Our 3, I'll tell you about one of our 3, which is your favorite topic and mine, subcontracting. This is an elaborate, and that's not elaborate, it's a detailed plan about what needs to happen in order to minimize what we hear called bait and switch, where you're part of the group that bids a contract and then no work comes out of it. A woman in the Air Force has done particularly good work on this area. Many of the areas will be of the no more than 15 topics. A lot of them are a result of town meetings that have been held. Many of the ideas have come from work across the government. The Department of Defense small business directors have worked hard to submit ideas, to perfect those ideas. So that's just the third thing that I wanted to mention to you, because it's something to watch for, and I'm hoping some good things will come out of it. Back to you, Dean.
Thank you, Director Oliver. Are there any questions do people have mics? Okay, if you want to start that process, let me ask my two panelists to react to something. Do you see the same linkage that I do with regard to the inherently governmental function debate and insourcing? Having lived this from the beginning of the fall of Baghdad, let's remind the group that incidents at Abu Ghraib with interrogators, private security contractor issues that you've read about all the time, and even more obscure things. Would you know that even in the medical areas, we outsource some of the high-end professionals. Some of the military medical hospitals have to hire contract cardiologists and contract orthopedics and so forth. All that's a function of not having enough people. So as some of these things have become very, very visible, I think that's what's balanced the scale here about why there's such a debate about insourcing. I think because the Department and the Congress don't want to face the obvious criticism, if you will, about, well, why the guy who took that shot, why wasn't that a military person? Or the guy who performed that heart valve operation, was the family understanding that that was a contractor cardiologist and not a military cardiologist? So do you all see the same linkage that I do?
Go ahead.
Well, I see, just to use your two examples, slightly different linkage. I think waging war and shooting people, whether you're a special agent or whether you're a member of the military, I do think that's inherently governmental. I don't think heart surgery is.
Interesting.
I have to talk from the business side of the house, I think, when it comes to insourcing, because as I look at the positions that we're targeting, those 10,000 positions that we're attempting to insource, those are acquisition-related type positions. Those are the ones that we rely on for engineers, logistics management, system support, and I will say that if I come from a contracting officer, I do believe that if you sign your name to a federal contract with a federal contractor, that you must be a government employee to do that. So when it comes, to is there a linkage to what we're insourcing, I think a lot of it was directly as we looked at it and we said, okay, what are those key positions where if we have somebody in a program office that is helping us design and their own contract for it, well, we wouldn't think of that as an inherent function. But if you're on the decision-making end of that continuum, we believe, yes, to make a decision on behalf of the government, that's a government inherent function. And if you're an engineer doing that, then that's an inherent function. And those were some of the positions we looked at to insource, to bring into the federal government. And I will say from actual experience from insourcing, if we looked at the acquisition professionals positions that we've identified to insource, it's also, I think, helping us to not only rebalance our workforce, it's helping us revitalize it, re-energize the workforce.
Thank you. I agree, because there's not that competency. Let me tear apart future combat systems for a moment and tell you that as you do the post-mortem on that, what do you find out? Army had less than 20 systems engineers capable of working on that, and had relied heavily on the lead system integrator. These are the things that make the policy people and the White House, as they perhaps should, feel uncomfortable. This isn't a question of there not being work for contractors. It's a question of what's the appropriateness. And so in the future, I think that we will be better served if we hire more Army systems engineers who then are capable of running the complex Army programs for which there will be a lot of work if we can demonstrate that we can run these complex forever. Sir.
My name is Carlos Del Toro. I'm president of SPD Technology Solutions. We're small but good. Part of my frustration, I served for 26 years in the Navy, retired, and I've been as a small business defense contractor mostly for the last 5 years. Part of my frustration hasn't been so much the insourcing. I'm a very positive thinking person. my frustration has been that when a small business across government contracting wants to, the government's convinced that we're the right company to do the work, or we're willing to compete. We want to compete. We believe in our capabilities. But when you go to the contracting force to go work, in many cases, one of the first things they tell you is that you got to go be a sub to company X, Y, or Z, and we're not going to compete it. So I really don't care about insourcing if you're going to hire 5,000 or 10,000 acquisition specialists that will then go about the business of actually competing more contracts for small businesses, then God bless you. But if you look 5 years down the road and you have not increased the number of small business competitions or business competitions in general, then shame on the government. And I simply ask that you view that insourcing with that spirit and that end goal in mind. Perhaps you can comment on that.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. I think that we have to be smart about, and if we just get away from the insourcing, and let's talk about the other 20,000 new hires that we are bringing in that aren't categorized as insourcing positions. Not knowing their ages or anything, but they may not have the experience or the skill sets yet that we're looking for. And if we are partnered in the aspect with a contractor that we are getting those, we're not going to replace a capability that right now we are fulfilling with a skilled contractor with an unskilled government capability. We've got to go at this smart, but we do know that we've got a challenge, and we are working hard with the Defense Acquisition University. We are getting, and I tell you that doing program acquisitions, I go out and I lead peer reviews, independent reviews on every acquisition over $1 billion, and I know that as we bring that down, but it's the lesson that we're trying to drive down in that particular organization, so at the lower dollar thresholds, that they are learning something from our approaches to this. But we tell them, to maximize that competition, you have to look at a lot of different things. And we're telling them on their skill sets is, take your time, do it right, listen. And what we've had to do for the last decade is, it's been hurry, 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 hurry. We're fighting a war. You must be fast. If you're within the range, go. If the statute will allow you, or if the regulation will allow you. Now we are telling them, let's slow down. Let's look at this. There are other ways that we can continue to support our mission while still doing it right and trying to maximize this competition. And we are sending that message to the workforce. And we're sending it through these peer reviews at those large dollar amounts. And we're telling them, let's take a moment here. Let's listen to what the contractors are telling us during industry days about the prior acquisitions that have been in place. So we agree with you. And we are attempting to send that message so 5 years from now, we won't hear that.
May I just add and say, you're dead on, my friend, about that. It's going to take time because bad habits were accumulated over 9 years of war. And these PEOs and PMs and project managers have been under such guns to meet operational needs statements, often thousands a month. And thunderbolts coming down from the Secretary of Defense or everywhere else saying, get this done, do this now. The peer reviews are very valuable because it is a trickle-down piece to say, well, now you haven't been thinking about competition. You haven't done market surveys to see what else is out there. Of course, the response from the contract officer at the other end is, I'm a GS-15, I have 9 times the workload that I had 3 years ago, and you're coming in here telling me you want another market survey. And then you tell me you want this whole IDIQ recompeted again. Tell you what, it's going to take me a minimum of 14 to 18 months to put together that recompete. Now, that's not a satisfactory answer to you, but I'm just telling you on a practical level, that's what's happening. So where we need in the services, OSD's Thunderbolt and Drive is to come down and say, when we start making the argument in Army about more acquisition professionals, be they contract officers, costers, all the people that will contribute to a better
Small
system,
business specialists.
that will contribute to a better system that you want, we have to then go and wrestle our own services because, again, in the big sit-downs and powwows about where are you going to redo your force structure, especially when you're at war, you're not anxious to go and add another 5,000 acquisition professionals when you can go ahead and put 5,000 infantry in. And so those are the battles then we fight at our level as well. But that's where we need OSD to keep saying, it ain't going to happen unless you keep adding to your acquisition workforce. That was one of the last things I did tell Dr. Carter before I retired, was that he can make his mark on the department by making sure that he's holding the services' feet to the fire about making sure that they are growing those acquisition workforces, as Congress has wanted us to do.
A question for both of you, Ms. Oliver in particular.
Oh, okay.
Howdy. No problem at all. I remember you saying that you had trouble seeing down here. Is actually more of a tactics question that I think might apply to some of the newer companies or the smaller companies here. A lot of people I know come from a background. For example, my partner. In fact, my partner right here, he designed the DPAP website a few years ago for another company, and then I worked with Denise Hansen to do Dr. Finley's a while ago. But now that we've started out on our own, without the backing of those with CorpCom or the larger companies there that we subbed with, we're finding that there's a lot of information on all the different sites, the OSBP site, for example, the one that we worked on before, and they say, oh, well, you might want to start with subcontracting, or you might want to start with, or you might want to go and meet all the SBSs, and then, for example, what we do, there's a lot of micro purchase opportunities in there. You might want to do that, you might want to do this. And the question becomes if you only have 3 or 4 people in one workforce, and you're sitting in this valuable fourth quarter where people have all the money, and even between the different SBSs, they say, oh, you know what, we don't really have anything, but I bet you could find a nice prime that would help you. Bye. Some people will actually say, we can't meet with you because we don't really have anything. Someone actually said to me, we don't want to meet with you because it's unfair. If we meet with one company, we have to meet with lots of companies. So why don't you send us what you have? And well, I mean, but I've gotten this from more than one at a time, so there doesn't seem to be any consensus on what a good strategy is, especially if you come from a background where, and you've got a lot of experience, but now you're hanging your own shingle and trying to move forward. What would you recommend are the key things to focus on, particularly since the fourth quarter is so valuable?
Let's see. Well, you start out with a big advantage because you understand OSD. I mean, you've been on the inside of OSD. I don't think that we do often say, I'm going back over in my head what you had said to me. We do often say, well, what about subcontracting? But that doesn't mean subcontracting is the best direction in every case. The advantage in subcontracting is you have somebody else standing between you and the peculiarities of the Department of Defense. But that's surely not true in every case, and it sounds to me like you understand where your market is. And you probably understand how to do business with the Department of Defense, which is one of the other big reasons to subcontract. And for services, the sorts of services, designing web pages and that sort of thing, there isn't any particular reason, and I don't even know why that would ever go to a big business. That always ought to be set aside for small businesses. It's not just 2 or more, there are hundreds that can do that kind of work. So if work can be set aside for small businesses, it should be, and most of what you do doesn't sound to me like it needs to be done through subcontracting. On the problem of, we all know that during the last quarter, there are lots of small contracts that need to be put in place quickly because there are always a bunch of things we wanted to do, have been unable to do, and money falls out of this program because it's not going to get spent, or that program. And so we're able to do a lot of things. So small business, the last quarter is good for small businesses usually. I don't know how, I don't know what to tell you about a leg up, except the places where you know, and you've been on the inside of OSD, the places where you know that organizations really wanted to do something else, just be sure to keep reminding those people that you're there, and you'll bend over backward, as small businesses do, to get yourself under contract and to provide whatever it is they need.
We're getting the signal here, but sir, do you have a question?
Yes, I do.
And then let's do, and then when we answer that, let's go ahead and take one more remark and out the door, okay?
Okay, my name is Claude Davis. I'm a retired sergeant major, service-able veteran, and I have a company, DX Company LLC, and I have a corporation that backs me. It's a $6.2 billion company. It's called Coleman Stearns. I have a life vest, inflatable life vest that I invented, that the Army done tested, the Navy, the Coast Guard. I've been to all the acquisitions. I've been to, and they told me, hey, you got to get this Coast Guard approved. They pay $50,000 to get a Coast Guard approved in the various colors. It's even in ACU form. We was out in Fort Leonard Wood. We jumped in the water with them. We was at Fort Eustis. The folks from the Army said, yes, we'd like to get this. And then all of a sudden, another company came in and they said, oh, we don't want yours. We're going to go with this other company. Under the Service-Able Veteran Act, I believe that there's somebody somewhere that should be able to stand in and say, hey, that I should be able to get a fair shake like the bigger companies that's coming in there, that's showing their product. If my product is just as it's just perfect as theirs. You know, it works the same. I mean, I jump in the water, it does the same thing. It's no different. So why do this larger company get a...
Were you responding to a solicitation and a request?
What happened is, yeah, the Army had said we had a need. The Army had a need for this particular...
a meeting or an RFP, an RFP?
Well, they had they have RFP.
Okay.
They have one. And the Coast Guard had one, the Deepwater program had one. I found all these programs out to have one. So we, myself and the Coleman company is showing these, the vest around. And we get in the door, just like they say, get in the door, look around, meet with the procurement folks and all that. Everybody say yes to the vest. And then once we show them the vest, we test the vest. They have the vest for months at a time, and they give us all good reviews, and then they turn around and say, oh, by the way, we don't want to, after we do all the changes and everything that they asked us to do, I get kicked back on this and say, now we don't want it. And it's time and time again.
Did they make award?
No, well, see, this was the Coleman Company. After the Coleman Company, they kind of contact them because I have the manager that runs around with me. He's out in Wichita, Kansas. Mm-hmm. And what he does, matter of fact, my vest is superior. That's the word I wanted to use to the vest that's out there now. And I got a... Okay. But
let me suggest this, because I know we've got to wind up. I'll be in the hallway, and I'll be glad to connect you to some people to give you a better answer than that.
Please.
Okay? Can we do that? Can I take that on?
Yes.
All right, panelists.
Excuse me.
Sorry. Yeah.
One more question. It's about insourcing. I'll give you a solution. Okay?
Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. What I want you guys to do is to put a mandate not to hire first in our small business people. I want that you guys go to the large companies, their people over there first before to go to our side. And what happens, you're taking our expertise to your end. To me, it's almost like a bait and switch mentality. It's like my prime. But if you guys put a mandate on your end to look at the large companies out there that has expertise, I know they're expensive, don't go to us first. Go to them first, hire those people, don't hire ours first. I would like to see that on paper within days or so, and that way we can talk to our employees, make sure that
that's
they can't.
That's an interesting thing for the policy people. That's a policy point that they ought to
You have to, because you're taking our expertise. They took my people on my side at the prime.
I got it.
But what I want you guys to do is to put a mandate at your end to make sure that those guys that we send out there, our expertise, my subject matter experts, will not be hired at your
got
end, at your expense.
I got it.
You got it?
I got it.
Thank you so much, sir. Appreciate it.
All right. I'm going to be, on behalf of our panelists, I'm going to say thank you. And Commander Bruner, thank you for being a champ and hosting this. And I'll come back anytime and take on this crowd, all right?
I think, Dean, you could probably run this for another 3 hours, and this is
Thank you both.
fascinating. And we would like to be going for another 3 hours, but we do have a time line that we're trying to meet. So thanks again to Dean and the panel. We're going to take a quick 5 minutes, if we could have the Homeland Security guys up here, and then we'll keep going, because I want to make sure you have time to get your questions answered at the tables afterwards.
That was great. That was a lot of fun.